Alright, we are back with a new video, and today I am finally talking about the Owl House once again, now that we've gotten, thanks to them, the first of 3 hour-long specials that are meant to wrap up the series. This one mainly focusing on the aftermath of the season 2 finale, and for the most part, I felt like this special was pretty good. I felt like there were plenty of good things going for it, although it's not without its issues, and we'll be talking about those along the way. And obviously, this video will contain spoilers for not only this episode, but for previous episodes, so if you don't want to be spoiled, now is your chance to click out. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into the review here. So obviously the main focus of the special is Luce and the others trying to find their way back to the demon realm, with almost all the screen time being them on Earth and them, like spending time there trying to figure out ways to get back, only to have it end with them getting to the portal and going back to the demon realm. Again, I felt like that was largely going to be the plan, as I felt like it would make sense for them to do that, and then the other parts to focus more on the actual battle of defeating the Collector and along with that Bellows. So to that end, I feel like a lot of the special felt more like build up towards what's going to be happening after they return to the Demon Realm, more so than a story that stands on its own. Though, considering that a lot of people are going to be seeing season 3 as one big episode per se, or I guess one long movie, then I guess this is a bit excusable, as this definitely feels like the first act of what's going to be a pretty big climactic finale. But still, along the way, we still can get some pretty good stuff. I mean, obviously, we have the opening, which is largely dedicated to the gang trying and failing to reopen the portal over a couple months. And this all plays during a pretty interesting montage with the theme song. And I felt like this was probably the best way to go about it, as we still see them trying to reopen the portal, but along the way, they have plenty of bonding, which does become a focus to a degree later in the episode, with them talking about how they got closer over their time in the human world. We get some pretty notable moments during this segment as well, like Luce coming out as bisexual to Camilla, and along with that, introducing Amity as their girlfriend, which I did find a little strange, as we did see in yesterday's lie that Camilla did have a bisexual button on her fridge, which kind of implied that she already knew that Luce was bisexual. And then this just felt like more of confirming what Camilla already knew, but it's still a pretty nice moment nonetheless. We obviously get Hunter trying to give himself a haircut only to get Willow's help, which again was a bit symbolic of Hunter trying to move on from his evil past, so at least there's that. And obviously the other big moment was Luce introducing Amity to Earth Rain, like sort of where Amity is a bit worried that it was going to be like the acid rain in the demon realm, but then she sees that's just normal water, and through that they have a bit of a bonding moment there. So on the whole, this was still a pretty good intro that definitely was a highlight for the episode. Then we get to the rest of the episode, which again largely held up, though I do feel like that's where more of the issues start to crop up. We do have this double story going on where Luce and Hunter worried about keeping their secrets from the rest of the gang, with Luce not wanting the others to know that she accidentally taught Philip how to use the light spell, which kickstarted this whole conflict. And then Hunter is worried that they'll find out that he's actually a Grimwalker, and through that a clone of Bellows, which he's worried about because he's really ashamed of it. And on the other hand, we have the rest of the gang where they feel like they need to do more to reopen the portal, and they go out on their own to try and reopen it. And along the way, they find the artifact that will help them like locate where the Titan blood is. And then when they find out that there is Titan blood in Graysfield, they decide that rather than tell Luce and Hunter right away, that they're going to wait until this hayride event a couple weeks down the road. And I definitely take more issue with this aspect of the story, where I kind of get where they're coming from, where they feel like Luce and Camilla have been really taking care of them during their time here, and through that they really want to surprise them to make it all worth the while. And that'd be fine if this were your typical slice of life story where they were human and they just ran away from home from a bad situation, and Camilla just took them in and took care of them. But this is literally a life or death situation. They're trying to save the world, basically. They're trying to save the lives of their family members that they weren't able to bring over. Like, Amity still has her father and her siblings, and they're probably suffering, like in the Collector's game. Luz has, like Ida and King back there, along with Hootie and Lilith. Like you have Gus and his parents. Like, you have like these people back home that you're fighting for, and these people are in a very dangerous situation. So the fact that you're unnecessarily prolonging like your ability to return and do something about it is pretty ridiculous in my eyes. I mean, it would have been one thing if they found the map earlier on and they were spending a lot of the episode trying to figure out what it meant, only to come up short. And it was only on the night of the hayride that they finally figured out like what it meant, that there was going to be Titan blood here in Graysfield. And they, from that, were able to go directly to Bellows right at the time to figure out that he's still alive and that he's still very much a part of the conflict. But instead, they literally figured out that the Titan blood is there and that they could get it at any time and return to the demon realm, like in order to save the world earlier. But instead, they have to come up with this excuse to wait off and try to make it this big surprise and like all that. But I don't know, I just wasn't really on board with that. Then we have Lucy's storyline, which I definitely felt like was handled better, but even then, it still had some issues. I like how she has these video journals that she basically treats as a diary, where I definitely feel like it makes sense for Luce to express herself through literally talking to herself versus trying to sit down and write down her thoughts on paper. And it's pretty interesting later in the episode when we see Camilla listening to all these previous entries and just seeing how Luce has developed over time, how she has handled her father's death and just trying to deal with the fact that she's a weirdo and all this build up towards Luce like getting to the demon realm in the first place. But then obviously she records a new journal entry later on where again she's contending with this whole guilt over enabling Philip and along with that the collector. And at the end of this video entry, she reveals that she had her own surprise planned for the gang, where after the hayride, she was going to announce to them that rather than go back and try to solve the problem that she had a hand in creating, that she was going to permanently stay in the human realm and basically leave them to try to solve the problem themselves. And again, I kind of see where she's coming from, where she is just so overwhelmed by the guilt of all of it that she doesn't want them to find out. She doesn't want to hurt them. And through that, she can't really contend with trying to solve the problem that she feels like she is responsible for creating. But she also doesn't seem to realize that by doing this, she would not only make it harder for the rest of the gang to actually solve the problem that she feels so bad for creating, but she would also be leaving behind Ida and King and Hootie and all these people that she also wasn't able to bring back when she went over to the human realm. That she would basically be allowing them to basically be at the mercy of whatever efforts the gang are able to put up in trying to stop the collector. And admittedly, the episode never fully acknowledges the consequences of these actions, though the decision itself is revealed late enough in the episode to where it's not really a big part of the story, as Camilla immediately, like upon hearing this, goes to the graveyard and basically puts words in Luce's mouth about how she and her will both be going to the demon realm before Luce herself can fully announce it, which I was perfectly fine with. I felt like that was a decent enough way to wrap up that aspect of the story. And then that leads right into the climax where Bellows is able to basically possess Hunter's body and basically trick Luce and the gang into his trap. And there's a bit of an interesting battle that takes place there, with Flapjack playing a pretty critical role in there. And obviously, Hunter is eventually weakened by Bellows to the point where he almost dies, but then Flapjack decides to sacrifice himself, basically absorbing all of his energy into Hunter's body to give himself new life. Now, the episode didn't give that great of an explanation for how a palisman is able to essentially sacrifice itself to save its owner, though, again, it's a pretty reasonable enough conclusion, as you obviously can't have Hunter die this early in the series, so take that as you will. And then it ends with most of the gang going into the demon realm, with the exception of V, who decides to stay behind and basically pretend to be Camilla in order to keep up appearances, which I was mostly fine with. I mean, I would have liked to see V more in these other specials, but I understand the explanation for why she needed to stay behind. So on the whole, the main story itself was mostly solid, and while there were some issues I had with it, I at least understand the rationale that the episode was giving for why these characters weren't acting entirely rationally, particularly with Luce deciding to stay behind in the human realm in order to make up for her guilt and her seeming inability to deal with the fact that she was so responsible for creating this whole conflict in the first place. And I should also touch a bit upon some of the other stuff that was happening this episode. We obviously have Masha returning again after yesterday's lie, along with the reveal that they are non-binary, and I do like the way that they went about it with them having their pronouns on their name placard, as well as even having the non-binary colors on their like fingernails, which I found pretty nice. And in general, they're a pretty cool character. We obviously have Jacob making his return during the hayride and him just being a lunatic, which I found pretty funny. And there were a couple other side gags that I found pretty nice as well, particularly with the gang going around town and trying their best to interact like with human stuff only to completely come off as weirdos. There's also Gus, who really wants to be helpful in the kitchen and making dishes, but is just completely bad chef. I do wish that element was focused a bit more on. I felt like they could have gotten a bit more humor out of it, but I'm fine with it as it is. I also like how the characters got new hairstyles in this episode, with Luce growing her hair out, along with her wearing a beanie with the bye pin on it, which I found pretty cool. There's also Amity, who has definitely grown out her hair ever since the last time she dyed it, where she has a much bigger brown patch in her hair now, and the purple dye is actually faded, which I thought was a pretty cool appearance and pretty realistic, all things considered, considering the amount of time they've been in the human realm and showing that passage of time, which I found pretty interesting. And then, of course, there's Hunter's haircut, which was pretty symbolic, though it was actually pretty minor in terms of his actual appearance. So there's that. And then the other element to this is the fact that Willow's taking all these pictures throughout the episode, not only during the montage, but later on when she's just randomly taking pictures during the episode. Now, admittedly, I felt like this could have gotten a bit more follow up in this episode, aside from the actual scrapbook, though part of me does figure that they'll at least touch upon it later on. I feel like the scrapbook will actually be used when the characters are at their lowest moment in some of these later specials, in order to like help them get back in the good spirits. So I think that is partially the purpose of it, though it doesn't get too much explanation in this episode particularly. So on the whole, I did find this episode to be pretty solid, where despite it being in a largely different setting than normal, I still found it to be largely in the spirit and tone of the rest of the series. And it does make me more excited for the next two parts, as I feel like it's going to make for a pretty climactic finale. So there's that. But there we go. That will do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out with the channel. Now, obviously, I'll be back when the next special comes out, which I believe is currently scheduled for January. So stay tuned for that. And I'm covering other series as well that I enjoy, so stay tuned for that as well. And if you haven't already, be sure to join my Discord server, which I'll leave a link to join in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way. But for now, that's the video. See ya.